we're finding a lot of things that are creating a solution for a problem that doesn't necessarily exist. So I think the Cosmos tech stack in and of itself is a very mature tech stack, right? But the actual economics of the ecosystem, I believe, are quite immature and could use a lot of love, quite frankly. But I think it really is broke. I think a lot of these protocols, in terms of how they do inflation, in terms of how governance works, I believe it is quite broken. I still think it's a really great platform. I think it's doing a lot of great things. We've come a long way, but I think there's more to go. And I don't think we need to dig our heels into what we have now and think that this is the end goal for the Cosmos.
Welcome to the Bare Metal Podcast.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Bare Metal Podcast. Today I've got Max here with me in a dual role as a member of CryptoChem, the validators, and also as a part of the team at Phi Labs. Welcome, Max.
Hello, I'm happy to be here. Excited to be on the podcast. I've seen a couple, or at least one of the episodes, and it's very enjoyable. So hopefully I can provide the same type of context and fun, but happy to be here. Thanks.
I'm pretty sure this one's going to be great. So let's dig right into it. First question, this is the Bare Metal Podcast, so I have to ask, you guys are validators. What's your setup, hosting, team? Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So we're a team of about 4 people, 4 core contributors. One is our professional node operator. That was actually his background in his traditional world. He worked on infrastructure and security, so this was nothing new to him. And we utilize him to run all of our nodes. We believe that it's important to have a professional operator because you are in charge of a lot of people's delegations, and of course there's always slashing, so that's something you have to look out for. But we unfortunately are not bare metal. We do not own our servers yet. We're hoping to eventually, own our own infrastructure and run our own infrastructure as we build up more runway. But as of now, we host it on a few different providers, and we try to be fairly diversified in who we host on. And we initially were part of the Hessner group, and we realized how concentrated it was and decided to move off of that. So now we're on a few different service providers depending on the chain. But we think it's important that you're not all on the same data centers where if it goes down, everyone's down. Absolutely,
that makes sense. I'm glad to hear you guys are aiming to buy your own service. That's the sort of like the gold standard everybody should be going for. You mentioned there are 4 people on your team, though. So what do the other people do? What are the other functions that the validator needs to operate?
Yeah. So we have myself and then 2 others who are basically in charge of the content and really just educating our delegators and providing context to a lot of different things. For example, governance proposals and what a chain does if we're planning to validate on one. It's interesting because there's a lot of different roles, right, to running a node. It's not just about knowing the technical side and how to run the node. It's also about being able to communicate with your delegators. But then it's also about understanding, what the governance proposals are meant to do and how they'll impact the network. And that sometimes requires more than just one person. Not everyone has that wide array of expertise to be able to provide, all that in one. So I think it's important that, if you see a node operator who's maybe not technical, but they're still out there, operating a node or they're the face of the node, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think there's different skill sets. And if someone's really good with security and infrastructure, that's what they should focus on. And if they're not very good at other things like, understanding how protocols are affected by certain things like governance proposals, then maybe they shouldn't be the ones voting on behalf of all the delegators. So to me, it's just, if you have one person who can do it all, that's amazing. And that I really am happy for those type of people. But we need a team to get it done here at Cryptochemistry, and we're happy to do it.
Right. That's pretty interesting. So to summarize or reflect what you just said, you're saying that a validator should think of their mission as dual, at least dual, in the sense of, number one, I'm providing security to the network, but number 2, I'm also a steward of the network, and that's actually a specialist role or like a work stream for the validator. And you guys have members of the team that focus just on this.
Exactly. It's like think about like a department in a company, right? You want people who are experts in their specific field. So we try to split it out so that the people can utilize their skill sets appropriately and then therefore provide the best service.
So you said there are 4 members. That's not I wouldn't call that the large team. I mean, it's definitely 4 members is great to have. Do you guys manage to do any sort of public contributions or do you provide any public goods for blockchains where you guys validate?
Yeah, we do. So we provide like a few tools, mainly validator tooling. One of the more prominent ones that we provide is the price oracle monitor. So for certain blockchains like Kujira, there's a requirement to provide updates on the oracles every so often to make sure that we're getting a wide array of different oracle prices and we're not going to have these weird spikes happening, on chain. So a lot of times validators don't realize this, or they'll start to miss committing certain oracle votes, and therefore they need some sort of monitor to help them out. And that's what we're really trying to provide, is just the basic tooling to make a validator's life easier. Anytime we can remove friction from their daily tasks, that's better for us, because they have plenty to worry about as is, just making sure the infrastructure is running as intended. So the more you can kind of take out of their hands and give them the tools to prevent issues from happening, the better.
Are you guys users of any other software made by somebody else?
Yeah, we use
Validator to Validator?
Yeah, we use some Panic, stuff like that. And then Blockpain, I know we use quite a few of his tools. Our node operator is a very big fan of Blockpain and enjoys supporting them. So I think I have to give him a little shout out here.
Yeah, absolutely. This guy's doing great work. I want to get sort of more into Cosmos and the ecosystem play, but before that, let's talk about the other part of why we're having this episode, and that's Phi Labs. So what's Phi Labs? What do they do?
Yeah, that's a great question, because we're kind of under the radar a little bit. But so Phi Labs is the development company who's one of the core contributors to Archway protocol. So we're building out a lot of the core infrastructure that will be utilized to build on top of Archway. So we have a wide array of roles that we do at Phi Labs. But yeah, overall, we're here to support the actual protocol itself, kind of be a steward of it as you'd expect with many of the other chains. You kind of need someone to maintain the overall infrastructure. And then over time, we expect the community and other contributors to do that and help out. But at the beginning, it's very helpful to have a team that can really focus on some of the core functionalities and get those built out so that the rest of the public can kind of utilize it.
I'm given to understand that Archway is going to be a sovereign blockchain. It's going to be sovereign L1 with its own set of validators, which is not necessarily going to be the standard, but we'll be back to that later. Archway is going to go this way. So the way I understand what you're saying is you guys are contributors to the actual sort of L1 stack, but then you're also developing some primitives on top so they can be deployed right from the get-go when developers want to hop on and build something. Can you talk more about what sort of infrastructure will be available?
Exactly. Yeah. So internally, we're building things like a dashboard and wallet, obviously, so you can collect your Arch and create wallets or create addresses. We're also supporting teams who are building things out like DEX. The main one is Astrovault. On top of that, I know we've worked with Lydia Labs, and they're creating a liquid staking platform as well. But outside of those applications, we're building just basic tooling, right? So ways to upload smart contracts and ways to interface with the actual blockchain. So we're basically providing you the bare minimum type tools for someone to go on top of that and start building out their own application and really utilizing what I think is the cool economics and just the functionality of Archway.
You mentioned economics. That was going to be my next question. So I'm hearing or I'm reading on Twitter, some very simple basic tweets that are saying, Archway is going to use transaction fees in a certain way to incentivize development of protocols. That's pretty interesting. I don't know anybody else doing this in Cosmos. So can you explain how that would work?
Yeah. So there's a few different ways that we're essentially trying to think about in terms of the protocol, how we can reward developers. And those are done through a few different ways that I can kind of talk through. And the first one's kind of, it's not necessarily what I would say is new. So this one is a fee grant. And that's something that is, I believe, already built into the Cosmos module. It's just not utilized too often. And that essentially allows you to take away some of the friction to the user and grant them an initial amount of gas where the protocol essentially covers it. So think if you're first time entering an ecosystem and you want to use an application, but you don't have any of the token, right? You either have to go find a faucet or have someone send you it, or you have to go to a different ecosystem DEX and get that token. Well, we would like to do things where you start right here and you can go right away, don't have to go to a different eco and do all these different things. So a fee grant kind of allows that, basically subsidizes that first gas transaction so you can start your journey right there in that ecosystem. That's one minor thing. It's not really a developer reward. Then there's the fee split. I've seen a few different protocols recently implement something very similar. Essentially, when the gas is used for a transaction, it's going to split it in some fashion, and it can send it in a multitude of different directions, whether that's burning it, sending it to a community pool, or it could even send it to a direct wallet, right? At Archway, we're thinking we're going to do more of a fee split with the developer. So half will be burned, and the other half, the gas will go back to the developer of the smart contract that was utilized, or that the gas is utilized for. Because I think and before I kind of go on a little bit more into what makes, I think, the reward structure unique with Archway, is that a lot of times applications really in the current environment don't have a way to extract value for their work. Almost all chains subsidize the validators, or I guess incentivize the validators through inflation for security, but don't actually reward the developers. So in order for a developer to somehow extract their value, they have to either create a token or structure some sort of equity deal and go out and actually get funding. So this is pretty common in the space, and that's kind of how we've been operating in the Cosmos for a while. But the problem is, once these initial fundraising efforts run out, if you're not producing significant fees or value, then the developer's not really getting much out of it. So they're either forced to issue a token so that they can sell it and get a value out, or sell the actual product itself as an equity type deal like you'd see in traditional business. So Archway kind of wanted to change that whole narrative and really provide the developers with a reward for what they've done. And that's kind of how we designed these next two features, which we call contract premiums. And that's essentially just allows a user to add a specific amount to the minimum gas. And then that allows them to have a actual business model they can develop, right? Now you know exactly how much you're going to get per transaction, or at least minimum you're going to get per transaction. And then you can use that premium as the contract developer to do whatever you want with it. If the user decides to pay it, that goes back to the developer or to whatever wallet they specify, and that can be used in many different ways. And that's really up to them. And then additionally, we decided it's important that, you can have all the security you want on a chain, but if there's no applications and there's no users and there's no, volume, what are you securing, right? There's nothing to secure. So you have to incentivize people to come build. And we think a good way to do that is to split some of the inflation and actually give it to the developers. I think validators are very well compensated on most chains through inflation. And so to take a small piece of it, in our case, we're only going to take a very little piece of the overall inflation, but we're actually going to give it back to the developers based on their contract usage, I guess in relation to the overall network. And there'll be caps on that to avoid, attack vectors. But overall, if your contract's being hit and causing, 90% of the on-chain volume, you probably have a good application. People really utilize your stuff, and you should be rewarded for doing so, not just the validators. And this is coming from someone who runs a validator, right? But I do understand that if we're not doing 100% of the work, we should get 100% of the rewards. So I think that's a huge differentiator with Archway, the protocol, that people haven't really either, I don't know if they don't understand it or haven't quite latched onto the idea yet, but I think a lot of developers will understand and will have that kind of thought in the back of their head, like, you're right, I have been doing a lot of work for free here. So.
Right. And I mean, it makes sense to me even from a position of a validator, because if that chain doesn't reach sustainability in the sense of actually serving users and providing them with something they're willing to pay for, then there's not going to be a chain, right? So if the validators should be incentivizing, helping incentivize or distributing part of their rewards to developers to make sure that chain actually develops a real ecosystem to which users are going to flock. That sounds
absolutely.
pretty. I mean, now that you say it, it sounds pretty, sensible. I'm wondering if anybody else has tried something like that. Have you guys? Is there any other chain, maybe outside Cosmos, that's been doing this?
I know some chains have tried to implement similar type mechanisms, but they've been very surface level, mainly just fee splits, right? No one's really taken it to that next level of looking at inflation or the idea of a contract premium. And I think mainly because it's not a standard thing you can do in the Cosmos or in Cosmosm. So it's something that you'd have to actually build out on your own and create your own modules. And that's something that we've taken on at Phi Labs to do because we believe it is important to have this functionality in the chain. Especially because a lot of times you'll see these products that are really good products, but they don't really necessarily need a token, but they have a token. And the reason they have a token is because, again, that's the only way for the developers to extract value out. And I don't mean that in any sort of derogatory way. I believe that developers deserve to be rewarded. But it's not healthy for necessarily the ecosystem if the only way that someone can extract value is to sell their token, right? It doesn't necessarily align.
It's the old adage, not every project needs a token, right?
Exactly. And if you can create a platform that allows you to build your application without having to worry about your token or worrying about structuring all these different type of equity deals, I think that's going to be a big benefit to a lot of different developers. And you don't even have to create a full-on application, right? It could be a single smart contract. If people are using your contract, that's going to directly reward you. So from a developer standpoint, I believe this is a very, very unique model that just hasn't been tried. But I think it has a lot of legs.
Absolutely. I love hearing that. I think it's a great idea because it takes, in particular, at Archway Labs, we're also trying to, or we're building out some products, right? And this is a headache. How do you think about revenue that's in a way that's compatible and allows you to be relevant in the Cosmos ecosystem, but also reach some sort of sustainability? And what you're saying, if I wrap my head around it as a developer, I just write out my smart contract and I think about how would I design the contract premium? What sort of transactions my system needs, and then all I do is I think about the volume and what sort of numbers I can reach there, and I can have I can do some planning. I could set this contract premium to a reasonable level.
Yes, and you can do forecasting.
Right. Yeah. There's actual. You could do some modeling, and my question would be. I realize you guys have just come up with this tech, so I'm just curious. Is it possible to set the contract premium per transaction, or do I have to fix it inside the L1? Because some transactions could be much more valuable to users than others. So I'm just wondering here, if I put my developer hat on, is there a way for me to sort of project this into the premium?
So the premium is going to be added on to the minimum gas. So as gas is dynamic, obviously you're trying to commoditize block space, something that Ethereum has done a great job of. As more people use the protocol, the higher the gas fee comes because there's more demand for that block space. That still applies to the Cosmos. So as more people are trying to use it, it's going to drive the minimum gas price up, and then it'll always tack on your premium on top of that. So in that sense, it kind of adjusts for it internally, or I guess inherently. But to your point, I don't think it'd be, so it's baked into the actual smart contract, the actual premium is, but the gas itself would be the dynamic aspect. So to a user, they're just going to see the one fee, and that's going to be based on minimum gas needed plus premium. So I don't know if that completely answers your question, but.
No, it does. And I sort of, even if somebody went and implemented those, let's say, dynamic contract premiums or settable or, controllable, it still needs a lot of analysis, right? There could be exploits, in the sense of I just add on a large value and then, rob the user. The user has to be really careful checking their wallet. So there's a lot of ifs around this. But this initial construction to test it out sounds, it sounds really interesting. That's something that I need to wrap my head around and think about this a little bit more. It's just like a different business model for devs where they don't necessarily have to worry about how exactly to monetize. They just need to worry about how to create a good product that people are going to use.
And that is, I could not have said it better myself. It really does. And that is the perfect way to put it.
Yeah, I love that. So Phi Labs is on to some really interesting stuff. What is it exactly you do at Phi Labs? I mean, what is your job in this, in the enterprise?
Yeah. So my official role is strategic business development. It's a bit of a hybrid role, mainly in the business development side where I'm just working directly with builders, developers, applications, trying to help onboard them on into Archway, at least the community, so they can understand what we provide and the benefits that they could basically utilize through Archway. And I also kind of work with them to understand, what's going on in the overall community, and then beyond that, help set the overall strategy for the overall protocol. So internally, I work with a lot of different departments and just discussing the overall ecosystem. What people want. What are they missing in protocols? And one thing I think that is kind of missed overall is we're finding a lot of things that are creating a solution for a problem that doesn't necessarily exist. So that's one thing that we've really tried to take a step back in that first principles approach and say, what is the actual problem? And then build something that'll fix it, right? And I think the developer rewards is one thing. So now my role is to, one, strategize internally. How do we get this message out there? Who do we talk to? Who's the most important people that need to know this? And then two, what type of people and where are these people that we can bring to utilize this and really showcase the abilities of what Archway could do. So that's my main role. But yeah, we're a pretty diverse company. We're built out similar to, I think you'd see a traditional company with departments and a lot of areas of focus and expertise with really talented people that we're actually incubated out of Tendermint. So as you can imagine, there's just a ton of talented people working on the protocol, and it's a really exciting time to be part of the team.
Absolutely. You've said a lot about sort of having internal discussions and explaining things to the outside world. Has there been an example of where you guys have realized that something is missing and you just went and built that? I mean, maybe the developer rewards idea came from the outside. I don't know. But does it happen in your conversations with the community that you're going, oh yeah, I think we'll have to solve this problem somehow, and then bring it in?
Yeah, I mean, one key one would be governance, right? We've talked a lot internally about the governance and how it works currently in the ecosystem, and we'd like to fix it. We have some really cool ideas of how that could work, and we're working with some teams that we're hoping are going to help us get that done. So that's one big thing I would say is one thing we're trying to improve on. And the rewards really came from the idea of one of the leaders at Phi Labs, Griffin. He came from a background working at Consensus and was part of a lot of the Ethereum community coming up during their product launches and all of that. So he's very experienced in the space and has really seen a lot of how this space operates. And one thing he really has instilled in us is how disenfranchised some of the developers were because of these things we talked about, where there's just no way for them to extract value. And therefore the people who either created the actual company or application are the ones who are the ones getting the lucrative rewards. But what he noticed was that there was a clear disconnect. There was something missing where the developers just aren't included in this process as much as they should be. And so that was kind of what birthed the idea of Archway was, how do we change that? And I think the Cosmos just makes the most sense because we believe that the tech stack is the best that we have available currently.
That's really cool that you guys have an Ethereum OG that chose to come to Cosmos, build on the stack, and could come here and use all that experience, right, to try and or push to scale something inside Cosmos. So before that's of course I'm interested in a lot of things about a lot of your views on various Cosmos topics, but there's one more thing I want to ask. What's the most exciting thing coming out of Phi Labs in the near future? What should I be looking for?
Well, obviously, besides the overall protocol, which we're hoping is going to be ready, and I will say comfortably that I think it'll be, end of May or April. I think those are kind of stretched timelines, but we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. But that would be my most exciting part, is just to get the infrastructure out there so people can use it and really see what they can do with it. Other than that, we're doing some cool things we have in the works in terms of trying to get the community involved, trying to get developers' attention. Specifically, I think Area 52. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's essentially
I've clicked through it. Yeah, very nice.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's a interactive learning center where you can actually learn to code in Cosmosm, and it'll walk you through the steps. It walks you through this kind of animated story based on Area 52. It's called, so obviously it's a little bit of a homage to Area 51, so it's alien themed. But it's just a cool, fun way to like learn Cosmosm at the basic levels and onboard new developers. And then over time, we intend to add more lessons, and I imagine they'll increase in difficulty to the point where, you'll start to have more senior developers still coming there to learn different things. And we want to host workshops and really just be a steward for developers in the Cosmos ecosystem. I mean, obviously, we'd love for them to come build on top of the Archway protocol, but at the end of the day, we just want to empower developers. We care about the ethos of the Cosmos, and we just want to see it continue to grow and see the tech stack continue to advance. Because like I said, I think it's the best available, and it's something that we're happy to contribute to and continue to innovate on.
Absolutely agree. The Cosmos tech stack is absolutely amazing. Modular, easy to use, easy to work with, manipulate, hack. It's pretty awesome. Let's take a step back though and think about Cosmos as a whole. What would be your view, of the entire ecosystem and all the sort of verticals or areas, including say governance, funding, public goods? There have been a lot of discussions recently around this. Can you comment high level on where you see Cosmos and how mature these individual areas are?
Yep, and you just said the keyword there, right? So I think the Cosmos tech stack in and of itself is a very mature tech stack, right? But the actual economics of the ecosystem, I believe, are quite immature and could use a lot of love, quite frankly. I think a lot of teams have kind of defaulted to using models they've seen before in the space, which I do understand. If you see something work and it's successful, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But I think it really is broke. I think a lot of these protocols, in terms of how they do inflation, in terms of how governance works, I believe it is quite broken. And that's not to discourage anyone, building or the Cosmos in general. I still think it's a really great platform. I think it's doing a lot of great things. We've come a long way, but I think there's more to go. And I don't think we need to dig our heels into what we have now and think that this is the end goal for the Cosmos. The whole industry is very, very new in my eyes, and it's really starting to catch on more mainstream, but we're still really far away. We have a lot to do internally, in my opinion, in the Cosmos ecosystem to improve, to get to the level where a standard user who has no experience in blockchain could come over and start using an application. Or really just the experience in general for current users, I think could be improved, and from a governance standpoint, for example. So overall, just great ecosystem. There's some of the most brilliant developers in the world here. I mean, what like Confio's done with Ethan Frey and building out Cosmosm, what Jay Kwan has done building out Tendermint, the consensus algorithm. I mean, there's just so much that's come from this space and this ecosystem. It's really amazing, but there's still more to do.
Right. So you alluded to Confio right now, or you mentioned Confio. If we look at the economics part, I mean, I guess one part is, let's say, revenue models, or how to, not emit tokens all the time and just like have reasonable ways to reward or incentivize various parties. And bring in promise of crypto, which was to organize diverse groups of people, right, without necessity of force. But Confio seems to be, at a bad spot right now. I guess you've seen the messages on Twitter that I've been reading around today. What's your take on, public funding in Cosmos in general, and in particular on the Confio situation?
Yeah, I mean, well, they're in a tricky position, right? Because they're trying to do like basically altruism. They're trying to do the best they can for everybody, and they're not asking for much. But the problem is there's a cost. I wasn't able to really go in depth into their article, but I believe it said that their burn rate is about $2 million a year. So they're spending a lot on infrastructure and developers, and really just to maintain what we already have. And they don't have any way of really replenishing it or extracting value, because it's a public good. It's free. I think public goods are extremely important, but that means we need to find other ways to subsidize these types of groups like Confio. I don't know exactly what that is yet. I'm very open to helping come up with a solution, because I think they're extremely important to the cosmos. I think they're integral to the future of the cosmos, and I would hate to see them have to move on or reprioritize because of financing.
Right. What about the governance part? Sort of mentioned governance, but we haven't really dug into it. So if you think of Cosmos governance, recent events, let's say last quarter, last half a year, what are your thoughts? What's your take on the current state of governance? Does it need to be improved? How? What can we do?
Yeah, well, I think we all know that the Cosmos governance can get quite contentious. People are very passionate.
Well, at least on Twitter.
Yeah, definitely. And the forums everywhere. But yeah, people are very passionate. I love that. But overall, the governance structure in my eyes is it's not reflective, I think, of what it should be. This is my personal opinion. But I think that it's more like a pay-to-play type approach, right? Voting power is acquired through purchasing a token, which requires monetary value. So those with the most money, therefore, have the most power. I don't think that's the vision the Cosmos had, being, their decentralized public good altruism. That doesn't really align with this pay-to-pay type model for voting. On top of that, you have validators who are really the most significant voters, considering most users are not voting on a day-to-day basis or checking in on the protocol. So I personally would like to see more of a reputation-based model, an on-chain reputation, something that's objective and verifiable, that gives more weight to users who are truly engaged in participating in the network and probably have a better understanding of the network and the pros and cons of the decisions that are being made. Right now, even down to the discussions, I don't think the discussions of props are well broadcast. You have to go to a specific forum based on the chain. And even if you get to that forum, it's hard to really parse through all the information and all the discussion. People don't have necessarily hours a day to do this. And that's where you count on your validators to kind of be aligned with you and your ethos so that they can spend that time reading through the props and really thinking about how this is going to impact not only their delegators, but the overall ecosystem and that chain specifically. It's a tall task, and I don't think there's one easy solution to fix Cosmos governance. So I'm not here to say everyone's wrong, I'm right, this is the way. I don't know. But I do feel like a reputation-based voting system would actually give more power to the people who deserve to have a say, more or less than the people who just happen to have a lot more money and thus have a louder voice.
Would you say combine or somehow construct a new model that would take into account these two dimensions? One is sort of the token ownership, and the second one would be the reputation. Or would you are you thinking more of like replacing the actual system? Like, do you need to still have skin in the game, to participate in governance other than your time?
I think it should be hybrid. To your point, I don't necessarily think that going to one side or the other is the answer. I think it's kind of meet in the middle of how do we, maybe it stays similar to where it is now, where validators do have a lot of the power, and you still can purchase the voting power, but you get some sort of weighted aspect to your vote if you're participating in certain things, if you're responding on forums, and a lot of these things would kind of have to go on chain for this to work, right? Because I would want it to be very much verifiable and not something you could somehow falsify to increase voting power. It'd have to be something that a task has to be completed or something of that nature. So it's definitely something that I'm interested in talking about with the communities and see what others think. But I would think that there's a better way. But at the same time, I do appreciate that any token holder has a say in how the protocol develops. So I'm certainly not against the way it works. I just think that we could do a little better.
Bring in personal time, focus, effort into the way. I like the idea. I would definitely love to sort of have a solution or have a way to account for these factors as well.
No, it'd be amazing because a lot of important decisions being made.
We've touched on sort of a little bit about the future of Cosmos. It seems to me, one of the things that seems to be happening is we have a new shared security model every 2 weeks. So by now there's sovereign chains, there's ICS variants thereof, there's Mesh, there's Alliance, there's Dimension, there's Sovereign Labs, there's Saga, all these ways where you can, sort of deploy your, let's say, app chain, but packaged in various ways or somehow, related to existing protocols. What do you think is the future for, Cosmos blockchains for security? Does the app chain thesis still hold? Does it hold in a different way? Is it somehow being twisted and modified? What's your take?
I'm a little conflicted on this. I think the app chain thesis still applies in some senses, but at the same time, I think when you're fragmenting too much with app chains, it can create a bad user experience. So you have to kind of consider both sides of that coin. And in terms of the actual modular stack and breaking it down into the different pieces and utilizing the core functionalities of a certain protocol that does one thing well, for example, like a Solana, fast execution. Maybe you want to use an execution layer, and Ethereum's got great security. Maybe you want to use their security layer. That's all something that can really be done on the Cosmos, and it's something I see a lot of teams are pursuing. Like you mentioned, Dimension. I believe they're working on the roll apps and more of the data availability. And same with Celestia, who's also kind of working on that data availability layer. And I think it's really interesting because you're kind of offloading certain tasks to these different layers that are very specialized and can do them easily, and still getting the core benefits you want out of the actual chain at the settlement layer. So overall, I think the modular approach to the Cosmos is going to be a big piece of the future. I don't know if every chain it'll make sense for, but I do see a modular kind of stack with multiple different contributors to that stack is going to be in the future. I'm not sure when that will be, obviously, but no, I'm excited for this, and I'm interested to see how it works out. I've actually written a few threads on this, just kind of talking about the modularity of blockchains and how they could be utilized. So definitely a topic I'm interested in, but not exactly sure where I lie.
So when we're talking about future app chains, what are the most exciting projects coming up that you're aware of? What would you pick?
So I just named two of them, right? Celestia is one. Dimension's another really cool one. I think I really like what they're doing. Those are really interesting applications. I'm obviously going to be...
what about, I know, Archway. Does that sound good?
Oh, I've heard of that one. Yes, I would say that I'm very excited about that one. If you couldn't decipher that from the previous statements I've made, very excited. But outside of them, I think I've seen a lot of new ideas coming up. I'm interested to see how they're deployed. One I really wanted to see, there's actually two now that I think about it. One is Nomic. I'm interested to see if they can actually complete that goal and really get it so that you have this way to get Bitcoin on chain in the Cosmos, like they have, or at least like they're aiming to do. And then similar to that, another one I've only looked into very briefly, so I can't speak too much, but it's called Babylon. And what they're trying to do is use Bitcoin to be the security layer for the Cosmos. And obviously, you can imagine Bitcoin has incredible security in terms of monetary value, what it would take to attack the network. Or I guess in their case, it'd be a hash power. But either way, the amount of infrastructure you'd have to own and take over would be, let's say, impossible for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, interesting that you mentioned that. I've spoken to Professor Tsay about Babylon Chain earlier. So their idea is to use blockchain Bitcoin as a time-stepping server that can enhance liveness properties of say Cosmos chains that would. So this is of course like a very interesting use case. I'm wondering who will be the users if they have somebody if they already have some projects lined up for whom they could say increase security levels or guarantees. That's definitely a very interesting sort of heavy security project and theoretical computer science.
And it's something that both...
My last question would be, please continue, yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, similar with what ICS aims to accomplish and what I think Archway is also kind of looking to assist with is like that initial deployment of an application, or, many times it'll be a layer one, is you need economic security from the start, right? There's always this attack vector that you could be taken over and your chain is basically forked or halted, or someone basically takes control of your network and now they control everything within it. When you first launch a chain, your economic security is pretty low. So one thing I think Archway can provide a lot of teams, and this goes for, really a lot of these things, chains like what Adam's trying to do with ICS, is provide that initial security for these chains as they're building up that economic security themselves, as they're bringing in users and creating value. They can count on the security of another chain and know that they're going to be safe. And then once they're ready and they're at that point, they can then spin off and kind of create their own layer one where they feel economically secure from the start. It's something not really talked about a lot, but with some of the market caps, you look at some of these chains, it would not take a large player much to go in and completely take over their chain. And that's a really dangerous vector.
So let's hope all these security solutions are mature and ready to help out these fledgling projects so they don't get hostile takeovered, or how else should I put it? So that's a hopeful end note of our podcast. So we've covered a lot of interesting topics. Thanks very much for coming on, Max. It was fun talking to you, and hope to see you again soon.
Yeah, hey, I appreciate it, and I enjoyed it, and I would love to be back on anytime. I really appreciate you having us on and talking about Phi Labs and everything we're building. So excited to show the rest of the community what we're working on. It's coming soon.